Make sure everybody's got a copy of the handout. If you don't have a copy, raise your hand and some of the ushers will help distribute a copy. Anybody need a copy this morning? Anybody? All right. Well, let's pray together as we begin. Lord, thank you for another Lord's Day. Thank you for the opportunity to come to worship you, serve you, and to focus our attention on you today. Thank you for all the work that's gone in these past several months as the Transitional Focus team has come together to seek how to better serve our community and serve you, Lord, in the carrying out the Great Commission in the spirit of the Great Command. We pray what we say today will honor you. We pray that our focus will be on working together to carry out the cause of Christ. So we pray these things in His name. Amen. All right. Dr. Matt, come lead.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Do a sound check. Am I good in the back? Everybody can hear me towards the back? Good. Thank you very much. Again, just want to make sure everybody have a copy of the slides that we're going to be presenting to you today. You're welcome to make notes. Today is basically a presentation about redefining governance within the church body. I appreciate the opportunity to use the Sunday School Hour to make sure that we get this message across as many people in our church as possible. Today, I'm going to do a slide presentation, and I'm going to try to go through it efficiently so that we can leave time for after it's over for any questions or comments that you guys have. The end goal is that next week, at the beginning of the worship hour at 10:30, we're going to ask for a vote to accept this proposal in yes/no fashion. So that's why we're here in meeting today. I have three principal duties for you. I need to be able to define why we need a church council. I need to be able to explain who will be on the church council. And I need to be able to detail how the church council will work. I realize that is my task, and that if I don't accomplish those three principal and primary objects, you're going to leave confused and doubtful, and the project will not be successful. Let's take a small minute to recap how we get here. Anybody knows me knows I always start back at the beginning. And after Brother James left, the initial responsibility of scheduling the pulpit and leading the church congregation fell on the deacon chairman. And immediately after we went through the transition, the congregation elected a pastor search committee. And everything we're going to talk about that has happened from that within the church body in this transition time all originates from this original election from the congregation. Just to remind you, 2 of the 7 members are designated by the bylaws to be part of the pastor search committee, and 5 of the 7 members are elected by us, the congregational body. Here is your current pastor search committee personnel. Curtis Hans was serving as the deacon chairperson. Terry Simmons was serving as the chair of personnel. The 5 elected members from the congregation were Scott Baker, Todd Ballard, Lisa Cobb, Ricky Kreisel, and myself. I always claim that I got the short straw because I'm sitting in the chairperson seat. Al out of the Pastor Search Committee, and with Pastor Dan's help, we created a 35-member transitional focus team. And we included Pastor Dan and our ministerial staff. We included the 7 members of the Pastor Search Committee, and then we filled the rest of the positions with a cross-section of our congregational body. We looked at all different age brackets, we looked at different ministries, and we looked for leadership within those areas. And that is the focus of the Transition Focus Team. If you're part of the Transition Focus Team, will you just raise your hand so that people can see and look around? Okay, thank you. If you remember, the church took the time to complete the Transformational Church Assessment Test. It was everybody. We had over 100 responses, which validated it. If you get to 100 responses, doesn't matter if it's 100, 150, or 200 responses, pretty much you've set the data points about where they're going to be. We also went through a thorough facilities and securities assessment. Over the last summer and fall, the Transitional Focus Team met for a couple of months and broke up into groups, and we went over all these results. And we have been bringing recommendations to the church body already, and today is part of that process. If we ended up deciding out of all of the assessment from the TCAT and the security and the facilities that we had 3 major areas of concentration. We had discipleship making, and one of the results from that was the merging of the services down from 2 to 1. We talked about communication, that we had a lot of social and digital media networks and platforms, but they weren't necessarily all at the same, messaging in the same way. Communication is communication within the church body, and communication is also the message that we're putting out into the community, and that's a level of focus that we're at. And today we're talking about decision making, and I'm part of that subgroup. The subgroup that worked over the last couple of months to present this proposal to you today are Jerry Converse, Curtis Hans, Pastor Dan, and myself. And Jerry and I like to say that if you hear something you like, it's our idea, and if you hear something you don't like, it's Pastor Dan and Curtis's, okay? All right. Did you know that Springfield Baptist Church already has in its approved church, has an approved church council in its organizational structure? Okay, it's not functioning right now. It has functioned in the past. Does anybody remember a church council? Okay. So we're not asking you to create a new entity within the congregation. It is here and it's in our structure. But we are asking you to help us to redefine it and to redefine how it works. Why do we need a church council? Well, we believe on the Transitional Focus Team that we have one task, and Jesus gave us one task, and you guys know this, it's the Great Commission, and I'm going to take a minute to read that. So then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." And so everything that we're doing and all this that we're evaluating and we're looking for efficiencies and effectiveness to be able to do this is to be able to fulfill the Great Commission. We believe that a functional, proper, working church council will help with that. He also said, well, this is what you're supposed to do. Let me tell you how to do that. And that's part of the Great Commandment, Matthew 22, 36 and 40. It says, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment of the law?" And Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourselves. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments." So that is our North Star. That is our direction that we're trying to go with the changes that have been proposed so far, including today. I shared this with you in our last presentation from an update from the Transition Focus team, and this is the decision-making process. It's our present reality, and it doesn't mean that good things don't happen. We have a lot of good things happening at Springfield Baptist Church. We have a lot of well-intended people doing well-intended things, and we have good results. But when we do a thorough analysis and we look at it, we understand that there's truly no clearly defined process at this time. Dan's referred to it multiple times. How do we buy a bus? Somebody said, hey, I want to stand up at business meeting, I want to paint the Sanctuary Pepto-Bismol pink. And, we don't have a way of properly going through a structure for that. We are vulnerable to manipulation from within. If we were to have a group to get together, right now it's just prayer meeting, and if there's enough people to have quorum, and if you have a majority, and we want to be able to kind of to keep an eye on that. And then we do have a history, right or wrong, that sometimes we make decisions independent of each other and other people's committees, even though they are well-intended. So, we think that having a church council will help to watch and safeguard against those issues. And so we're going to seek to have a defined process of governing the church and also helping with decision-making of the examples that I used. And so we have two things. Last week we handed out the two pieces of paper that were front and back. One was a diagram, and on the back of it was a church council. The other was the actual wording for the church council that we're asking you to adopt. And in there are two sections, a purpose and a principal duties. I brought extra copies if anybody didn't bring them, or if anybody would want copies. I do have some to the back if anybody needs any. Dr. Brewer, do you mind, or Aaron, thank you. There's a couple of hands over here. They're right there, Aaron, thank you. All right, so first, Jerry, I believe you're up for purpose. If you'll take time and read the purpose section for everybody.
The Church Council is to assist Springfield Baptist Church in carrying out the Great Commission in the spirit of the Great Commandment. It is the organization through which the ministries and committees coordinate their activities. The Council shall be responsible for managing and overseeing all facets of church function, including, but not limited to, calendar planning and priorities, coordinating and evaluating ministry priorities, and fostering communication within the various ministries and committees. Note, the Council does not replace the work of standing committees or ministries, but works to enhance communication, coordination, and collaboration.
All right, thank you, Jerry. So one of the three key concepts that I need you to understand about why is the Church Council is not to replace our current congregation work and leadership in our committees and our ministries. Okay, so before we get to the questions at the end, no, the Church Council is not replacing the good leadership and the good work that's going on in the church. Existing church committees will remain intact in their current form, and the same nominating process that we've had for years for these committees and chairpersons is also going to remain intact. The key here is that, and I'll explain this in a few minutes, but the church council members that are elected by the congregation, their sole purpose is to represent and advocate for the interest and the needs of the committees and ministries within their areas of responsibility. They are your flag bearer. They are the person that brings what you need to the church council for it to be talked about, vetted, and eventually brought forward to the congregation body. So that's why. Let's talk a little bit about who. We are looking for proven church leaders, and Dan's going to come and talk to this part, but we wanted the congregation to understand that this is not a lighthearted, yes, I'll sign up because it sounds like it's cool to make decisions. This is a very deep responsibility to the congregation. So Dan?
So we gave you a copy of the Church Council Covenant. The covenant would be the guidelines by which a church council member would agree to serve and to live by. I'm just going to read it for you. Church Council Covenant. Having agreed to serve as a member of the Church Council and being in agreement with the vision, mission, ministries, and purpose of Springfield Baptist Church, I can now commit myself to God, and to the members of Springfield Baptist Church to do the following. I commit to be faithful to God, my family, and the church. I commit to be a person of integrity by maintaining honesty, respectability, and confidentiality. Being humble, blameless, and upright. Being an encourager. Being willing to collaborate with others. I commit to be a person of prayer by having a consistent daily prayer life, seeking God's will to be revealed in all manners, supporting the council through my daily and consistent prayers. I commit to seek God's wisdom by daily Bible study and reflection, regular and active participation in Bible studies and worship at Springfield Baptist Church, seeking the guidance and power of the Holy Spirit in all things. I commit to be a peacemaker by being a good listener, by being a supportive advocate for the church staff and council, refusing to spread gossip, being a cooperative member of the council, always seeking to diffuse conflict biblically. I commit to be a willing servant by giving of my time, talents, and resources, giving at least a tithe of my income to Springfield Baptist Church while supporting other missions and other causes of the church. Being willing to be equipped for ministry and to equip others. Walking the walk of the Christian faith. Discovering and using my spiritual gifts in the life of the church and beyond. I commit to demonstrate accountability through continual spiritual growth by being responsible to God, my family, and Springfield Baptist Church through my actions, words, and deeds, being accountable to the council and to represent the best interests of the church, leading out in service and ministry to the membership. This is similar to a deacon covenant. It's similar to a covenant that we will use when we install your new pastor. It'll be a church covenant, things that the church agrees to. It'll also be the covenant of what the pastor is agreeing to do. So this is not for just anybody. This is for people that feel called, that are willing to give of the time. It's going to take a lot of time on the part of the church council leaders to both implement this, to get it working, and then to effectively lead the church in making better decisions. So that's what we've got.
Thank you, Dan. Curtis, where are you at? I skipped over your parts. Curtis, there he is. Go back just for a second. We defined the purpose, but we also defined some principal duties of the church council. And so Curtis is prepared to share those. They're on the papers that you received last week.
We identified 9 particular duties that we expect the church council to fulfill. Coordinate and synchronize the decision-making process of the church to enhance better communication, coordination of ministries and resources. To collaborate with ministry and committee leaders to develop and implement a comprehensive program of worship, evangelism, missions, discipleship, enlistment, equipping, and stewardship necessary to carry out the Great Commission in the spirit of the Great Commandment. To make recommendations to the church related to ministries and church priorities. All recommendations from committees or ministries must be vetted and approved by the church council before being presented to the church body for a vote. Preparing for approval by the church a calendar of activities for accomplishing these objectives that we've outlined. The council shall report to the church at least once each quarter, so at least at the quarterly business meeting. Recommending and or approving activities and procedures for the church programs and service organizations. Regularly evaluating the results of all programs, ministries, and activities, and recommending changes where needed. Enhancing communication between church ministries and committees to avoid conflict, confusion, and duplication, and administering church discipline as specified in the church bylaws.
Thank you, Curtis. I apologize for getting ahead of myself there. But Pastor Dan read to you the church council, and then I'll have to pause and let you into the insight to the 4 of us that were kind of trying to develop this. You know, we got to the end and we were like, all right, have we boxed ourselves in? Do we have 8 or 9 willing people to stand up and say they'll do this? And we're a little concerned with that, but we did go out on faith and said, this is what we think is the standard that somebody who takes on the responsibility of one of these roles needs to adhere to. Fortunately, we have those leaders available. Let's see, Ricky. There we go. So we're into the makeup of the church council. The church council will be a total of 9 members. There will be 7 congregational elected members to the church council. There are 2 automatic members. One is the senior pastor, and who is a non-voting member. The other is the chairperson of the deacons, and who has a vote. And so if you read there's 8 voting members of the church council. There's a minimum of 2 women, a minimum of 2 men, and the key here is that each person that accepts the nomination is committing to a minimum of 3-year rotation. And there is going to be an automatic roll-off, and I'll explain that in a minute. But again, a minimum of 2 women, a minimum of 2 men, and a 3-year commitment. Rick, you have any little help? There we go. So we have broken up, and in the diagram there are different ministry areas within there. The 7 congregational members that we elect together are going to have key focus areas. One area is this administration. Underneath this, we consider personnel committee, bylaws committee, the committee on committees, and the nominating committee. We have the missions ministries in there. We have the actual missions committee, Celebrate Recovery, Bread Ministry, the special events committee, English language learners, WMU, and preschool. And this is not all-inclusive. There are other areas in the church that we will find you an advocate for. Under adult ministries, we have our men's program, our women's program, our senior adults program, which had their Valentine's night dinner last night, which was well attended. Small groups ministry, which we hope to continue and to increase. We have our student ministry that includes the youth committee that is currently active, also developing out middle school departments, high school departments, and college and young adult areas. Children's ministry, the children's committee itself, the nursery committee, that will be their area of responsibility. Facilities ministries include the building and grounds committee, the kitchen committee, the transportation team, and the security team. And financial ministries right now contain the finance committee and the teller committee. Like I said, this is not all-inclusive. These are the things that are already listed in our bylaws as active committees. I know there are other teams and ministries out there, but there will be an area where you will have a champion and an advocate at the church council. The deacon chairperson, an automatic member, a 1-year member, because that changes each year, will include the deacon body, the ordinance committee, homebound, Lord's Supper ministry, and the widow and widowers ministry, which are currently active. And the deacon body actually is going to expand even more into other ministries now that we're trying to take some of the decision-making pieces out of the deacon body and move it to the church council. So the deacon body is going to be able to expand into more ministries. The senior pastor is the conduit to where all of our ministerial staff can bring their vision, their theology, and bring it forward to the church council. It doesn't mean that other ministers can't come to the church council. They may come to explain their vision and that. But really, the senior pastor, we've talked about this. Dan has trained us for this. 2 jobs: save the lost and equip the saints. And part of this church council is a part of the decision-making of equipping the saints. So we've defined why we need a church council. We've described who is going to be on the church council: 9 members, 2 that are automatic, 7 that are elected by us, the congregational body. So let's talk about the election process, and let's talk about council procedures. First, I'm going to talk about the election process. There are 2 phases of the church council that we're proposing. I'm going to explain the initial church council that we're seeking to start. And then I'm going to talk about, once we get through the initial phase, how do we go year after year and replace the people that roll off. In the initial church phase, the 35-member transitional focus team that I talked about earlier all submitted 7 names for the 7 elected congregational members of the council. And we took that list of 32 ballots with 7 names, and we created a master list and found the 7 most nominated people from that. Those 7 people were then vetted by Pastor Dan, and to talk about the church council covenant and the requirements and the responsibilities. And hopefully next week we're going to ask if the council proposal passes, we will have a second vote for those 7 nominees who were nominated from the 35-member transition team and who have read the council and accepted the responsibility. We will ask for your vote for them. Each of these 7 members of our church that have said yes to the responsibility of being a church council member has signed on for a minimum of 3-year terms. There are some that will serve 4 years and some that will serve 5 years, and I'll explain that next. We will begin an automatic rotation after the completion of year 3. So as we go into year 4 of the council, some people will roll off, and the church body will then nominate people to take those positions. So in year 4, the areas of ministry that will roll off by design are administration, children, and students. So before we begin year 4 of the church council, 3 years from now, we will be nominating only 3 members to replace the 3 members that are rolling off. Then in year 5, we will replace finance and missions. And then in year 6, it'll be adults and facilities. And after year 6, it's this system, until we decide to change it as a council itself or as a congregation, this will continue to go in a 3-year. But every year, starting in year 4, we will be having nominations and having elections for these spots. All right, now, everything about the process that we just talked about remains the same for our yearly re-elections, except for in year 4, when we replace those 3 areas of ministries that will roll off, nominations will come from the congregational body. Okay? That is the only difference in the process. We decided that just in similar fashion to how we nominate a committee on committees and they nominate people and we vote on them, to kind of make it representative, the transition focus team, the 35 members, acted in that fashion for the initial church council, for the initial members of the church council. Starting in year 4, it's come from the congregational body for each year. So we'll talk about procedures. Well, once we get a council elected, how are they going to operate? Initially, we're going to say that the council meets no less than monthly. That quorum is 75% of the voting membership. So that means 6 voting members have to be there to conduct business. And it also means, and 6 is off of the slide, but it has to require 6 affirmative votes to pass a motion. So if you have 6 members show up and you have quorum, you have to have 100% of the vote for something to pass. We thought that these were minimums that had to be established, so not 50% for quorum where 4 people could show up and 2 people can vote and the church is obligated. The purpose of this is to have a high level of vetting and a high level of interaction and dialogue about an issue and to make sure that we're all in alignment with this. The church council will serve on the same calendar as the current positions, but it should be noted that in order for us to be able to get the church council, we'll have to set the church council by vote prior to the current system of the committee on committees and the nominating committee for their standing committees. So we'll do the church council votes first, and then we will see about the rest of the committees after there, because one of the exclusions I don't think I mentioned earlier is that a chairperson of a standing committee cannot be on the church council. We wanted to have that to be a separate position. So people that can't serve on the church council are staff, are voted elected positions like the moderator, and then also chairperson committee. Can a person on the chair council serve on the committee and be a committee? Absolutely. But they can't serve as the chairperson because their job is to be the advocate for that chairperson on the council. The key, and why we say this, and we talk about this in the decision-making area of focus, is that all business items to be brought to the church body shall be presented, vetted, and approved by the church council before being brought to you as the church body. And I'll talk about this in a question later, but can somebody still come to business meeting and raise something from the floor? Absolutely. That's your congregational member right. That's not changing. But probably if this is implemented, as we hope, the decision may be, that's a great idea, let's get it to building and grounds, let's get it to the music ministry, let's get it to where it needs to go, and then let's get it vetted and brought back with the answer that we want, instead of doing it from the floor. All right, so the timeline of events that we're asking, today is the presentation, and in a few minutes we're going to open up for questions and comments. Next week, we are going to plan to open the service, I believe, with a special call business meeting, and we're just going to ask you to vote yes or no on the concept of accepting this proposal for the church council. If that, we'll then collect those, and we will, as service is going on, I think Jerry Curtis and I will go and calculate the vote. And if the vote is successful, then at the end of the service, we will come back and have the list of nominees to hand out, and you will have the opportunity to vote yes or no for each individual that's been nominated. Not nominate in block, as we do sometimes with everybody, but for this particular issue, for this particular responsibility, and for how important it is, you will be able to vote yes or no for each nominee that was brought to you. Okay, so I've done this in front of my kids, and I got all kinds of questions, and I've done this in front of the transition focus team, so I have anticipated some questions, and I wanted to run through some of them that maybe you might be thinking, and then we'll get to your comments and questions afterwards. Is a church council viewed as a positive or negative factor for our current senior pastor candidates? And there's a spectrum of candidates, and we've been working with Pastor Dan about how they lead and how the church should lead, and we feel very confident based on our past history and where we see that the church is trending and going forward about a congressional-led church, that this is a positive, that this is going to match the personality and leadership styles of the senior pastor that comes to lead us, that is being called to come. Okay? And our current candidates that we're talking to, they're all in agreement with this. And matter of fact, I talked with them on Friday, and they're in agreement with this. If you look over the diagram, there's two or three things you may point out. Why are there no areas? Why is there no designated area of responsibility for our music ministries? And that's a difficult question, and it's a good question, a valid question. The best that we came up with for this initial rollout is that the music programs flow through so many different areas of the church. They're in the adult ministries, they're in the student ministries, they're in the children's ministries, and so if there's a tangible thing that the music ministries need, like I need the buses, or I need these props, or I need this technology to accomplish its mission, then it runs through those departments and up to the church council. The theology of the music, and I want to do the Easter presentation and use this, and I want to do this, that runs through the senior pastor into the church council. So the music ministries has multiple avenues to find an advocate for what they need. Same thing about education. Somebody say, well, what about our education ministry? Sunday school. You mentioned men's, women's, senior adults, and small groups. How come Sunday school is not there? Well, we're a multi-generational church. Sunday school permeates all those different areas. Children, students, adults. Again, if it's I need books, or I need a bookshelf, or I need a new AV projector, we can run those through the proper channels to get to what we need. And if it's a theology question, it comes through the senior pastor to the church council. Why is the process different for nominating the first initial church council versus the year 4 when we do it every year? I explained that earlier. We wanted to take the 35-member transitional focus team who has been dedicating 6 to 8 months of looking at the data and looking at the opportunities and areas of focus to nominate the people that they thought would adhere to the church council to the best of the ability and lead the church for the next 3-year block. Our church council meetings open to the congregation. That was a good question, and I said, well, I think all church meetings are open to the congregation. I don't think there's anybody, any finance person, if you want to, they're posted, you know the date, time, and location, you can come. Now, you can't participate, but you can watch. But I will say that each committee, not just the church council, but any committee that has a very sensitive area to talk about, they can always call for executive session where they excuse everybody but the members themselves. But I would say that the church council meetings are just like any other meetings of a committee of the congregation. Will there be minutes kept at the church council meeting? I hope so. That's the goal. We don't know yet because it doesn't exist, and we're not sure how they want to conduct business, but I would think that we would have minutes to reflect the proposals and the discussion and the outcome. Will the minutes be available for church members to review? I would think so, because, again, this is a congregational-led church, and there are going to be decisions made, and there will be documentation on how those decisions are made. Will current items like business meeting be changed by the church council? Currently, we don't know. I would say that we're going to look to make sure that we're as effective and on point for the Great Commission by the Great Commandment as we can be. Is our current quarterly system on Wednesday nights or Sunday mornings, or is it the best way to do it? I don't know, but I guarantee it's going to be an area to be looked at. Currently, there's no proposal to change it. But the goal is to get the most information to the most members in the most effective manner. And that will probably fall under that decision. Will current committees and ministries be changed by the church council? As I mentioned earlier, there is no intention of changing our current committee structure. There's no way of changing our nominating structure, no way of the nominating process being changed, and the chair people to stay the same. The church council does not replace the work and the leadership and the missions that happen through our committees. Who are the initial church council nominees? It's kind of like the Oscars, and then the winner is, right? We have intentionally left that off today. And the reason for that, the four of us have talked about this at length, and we think that the process and the concept of the church council needs to be voted on by the congregation by itself and not dependent upon the personalities or the people that have been nominated so far. You will have an opportunity to vote yes, no for each nominee if the council is approved next week. But we want to make sure that the church body is comfortable with the structure, understands the structure, wants the structure to be put in place, and then trust that the people that God calls to serve are going to adhere to that the church council covenant. So no, we will not be announcing today who the nominees are. We do know who the nominees are. I will tell you, just to kind of give you the data behind it, there were 35 members of the transitional focus team. There were 32 ballots turned in with 7 names. Not everybody in the 32 was nominated in that room, but out of those 32 ballots, over 65 unique individuals in our congregation were nominated with at least one nomination. That's almost 25%, almost 20% of our congregation was nominated at least once. There were over 38 members nominated for more than one. We had 17 members nominated at least 5 times, and we've got one overachiever who was nominated 18 times. And maybe we'll reveal that later, who knows. But I want you to have confidence that even though you don't know the names, but I painstakingly went through the procedure as to why we did it the way that we did it. This was not something that we threw darts at the wall and see what stuck. This was prayed over. This was intentional. This was mission-oriented and goal-oriented. And so I'm excited to have this before you. This is the first rollout. This will change. This will evolve as the church changes and as the church's needs change. But we feel that this is the best first step that we can ask you to go alongside us with. All right, so Jerry's going to be on this side. Curtis is going to be on this side. Dan will be down front. I welcome any questions or comments that you have. I tried my best to take this to the halfway line, so that left us a good 20 minutes for comments in case there were any. So just raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone so everybody can hear your question or comment. Okay, well, let's do this. If you understand, okay, here we go.
Will we be able to nominate from the floor?
The question is, will we be able to nominate from the floor? As it's designed in year 4, converting from year 3 to year 4, and going forward, you will be able to nominate for the floor for a member for the church council. But we have designed this that the transitional focus team, that's been involved in the process for the last 8 months is the body that nominated the initial church council. Similar to our committee on committees we relegate authority to the committee on committees nominating committee for our committee structure. We followed that template, that these are the people that have done the work the last 6 months, and we trust for them to put forward the names that we need at this time. But for this initial council, the design is no at this point. Okay? All right? Jared, if we...
Okay, if that's the forum, then whenever you present the 7 names next week,
yes, ma'am.
What is the process for if someone, the names, each individual name, as I understand it, is voted yes or no? Does it have to be a certain percentage?
I'm sorry, keep going, I'm sorry.
Of that, like if a person doesn't get, is it a quorum of the congregation or what?
Okay, and I may not have spoken on that, it was on the slide, but it takes 75% affirmative votes for that unique nominee to be voted onto the church council. There are only 2 other positions that need a 75% vote. The rest of the church life is 50% majority rules. But Curtis, help me, it's the pastor and deacon, is that right?
Church staff.
Church staff.
I'm not even sure deacons have.
Okay, the church staff and the senior pastor are the only other positions that don't go by majority for being accepted, and we felt that this had the same type of responsibility. So it has to be 75% of the votes gathered next Sunday, affirmative, to be that member. If they don't, well, by design, we have everybody, I think we said 63 members, right? We have them all listed from numerically, the nominees. There was a very distinctive line of separation for the 7 nominees that we're going to bring forward. But there is a cluster of 5 more nominees that are right there together. And we can, at that point, we'll have to talk as a congregation, probably have to come back and let's talk again. But we have different options. We could go to the next 5 and bring those names forward, just like we did with the initial 7. Or we can open up conversation about at that point, if we're looking to do 1 or 2 seats, do we do it from the floor nomination? But currently, by design, I have every nomination listed in the top of the order from how many numbers there, and we probably would go to the next set that's an obvious cluster together and start there.
If after they're assigned, I guess this is kind of the Miss America thing, if someone can't fulfill their duties,
good.
In between the next election, are you all going to do the next person in line nominee? Or
that's an excellent question. What happens if somebody doesn't fill their 3 years? 3 years is a long time, and we're not guaranteed tomorrow, this afternoon. In the paperwork that you have and in the structure, we've specifically spelled that out, that if somebody does not fulfill their 3-year term, that the church council members will pick who fills that seat until that term is completed. And then it goes back to the congregational-led nominations. Now, the only difference is for that person, if you come in at month 18 and finish out months 18 to months 36, you can be nominated to come right back in if you want to. You don't have to automatically sit off. Anybody that serves from month 1 to 36 has to roll off for 1 year at the time that we decided. Remember, we did have some committees are going to stay on for 4 years and some committees are going to stay on for 5 years.
And this is the process.
All good questions.
This is the same process that the deacons have. We follow the model that's already in place for deacons, and if a deacon doesn't complete a term, the process that's in line for deacons filling a vacancy on the deacon body.
All good questions and all that we anticipate.
I think Curtis just answered my question. I wanted to know where the deacons fit into all this. They're not being replaced, right?
No, ma'am. Matter of fact, some of us that are in the deacon body see this as freeing. And I mentioned that we would see the deacon ministry and deacon body expand because we're trying to separate out a little. The deacons, good or bad, have been kind of the default board of trustees or making decisions even though they may not have wanted to be in that position. We're trying to take more of the decision-making and coordinating aspects out of the deacon body into the council and free the deacons up to be what they're designed to be and to be the hands and feet and the ministers to the congregation. So I was asked to give a brief summary of the material presented today to the deacons. There was not much. I did ask for questions. We didn't have much. I said, you will get the full enchilada here today, and so they're hearing it with you at the same time. But I believe most deacons feel that this is going to free them from unnecessary decision-making, administrative sides that they necessarily don't welcome, but they do manage. Good questions. Anybody else? There we go, Tommy.
Matt, is there any kind of oversight committee to look after this council in case problems arise, or are these 9 people it and what they say stands? And
well, let me rephrase that, or let me. It's a good question. Is there somebody overseeing this? Well, at the end of the day, it is the congregation that votes them in. They don't have the power to execute something without bringing it to the church body to be voted on. What they are is the funnel or the conduit to make sure that everything gets flowed to the congregation that it's supposed to be flowed to. Like I mentioned earlier, you can still stand up at a business meeting and raise a point of interest and have a commentary. So it's not that everything's hush-hush and secret. It's just there to be a funnel. They're ultimately they're responsible for their covenant. They're responsible to the congregation, and they're responsible to the ministerial staff to help them to achieve the goals the church is set to do. So that's the best I've got, but that's it. Okay. All good questions. Bill.
Will this be an amendment then to church bylaws?
It's not going to be in the bylaws. Well, I take that back. There will be one amendment to Curtis, help me. Did we already mention in the bylaws C, church council, that doesn't need to be changed? I think it may not need to be changed, Bill. Question is are we going to amend the bylaws? No, but there's an amendment to the organizational structure manual or organizational manual where you will find the church council there. So that's why we're bringing it before the body of the church to vote affirmative on it.
I think I'm fortunate enough to be maybe the current bylaws chairman. If I'm not, I'm on there. I've been on there forever. But whether this is actually amended in the bylaws itself or whether it's done through a different procedure, it's going to generate need to perhaps amend some of the provisions in the bylaws so that they're consistent.
But there's not a section labeled, there will not be a section labeled church council in our current bylaws, but it's referred to in the organizational manual. See there. All good questions. And this is the questions that we want. These are the questions that we struggled with and we kind of arm wrestled over. Again, this is our best attempt to give you an initial rollout of a new body for decision-making and governance.
This is probably a good time to say this as well. What we're voting on today is probably not going to be the final product for the next several years. This is a start, understanding that this is going to be something new for all of us. And as we work through the process of establishing this governance-type body, there are going to be things that come up that we didn't anticipate. For the last 9 months, we've been making sausage. We've been in the back room just kind of grinding through it and trying to anticipate a lot of the issues that come up and trying to address them ahead of time, but understand that there's going to be some stuff that comes up, and it's going to require tweaking as we go. And part of the reasons for allowing the transition team to nominate the first panel for leadership is the idea that many of the people that are on it will have been involved in the sausage making process and are in a better position to understand the strengths and the weaknesses as we have presented it today, and to make changes to it and adjustments to it. And it's going to take a little while, but we want to make sure that we have that process solidly in place after 3 years and working completely before we start working new people into the process. The process has got to be mature, and the process has got to be of greatest concern to all of us. Once the process is established and running, then plugging the personalities in, it'll take care of itself. Yes, a solid foundation, exactly right.
All right, last call for any questions. I appreciate you coming out and spending your Sunday school hour with us. Pastor Dan Curtis and Derry, thank you for helping to moderate this. I'll turn the mic off and I'll stand down front while we transition into worship time if you have any more questions. But I just want last chance because if you have a question, the benefit for the whole church to hear may be needed. But thank you for the time. We look forward to seeing the outcome next Sunday. Again, special call business meeting at the start of the 10:30 or at the 10 o'clock service. And then nominees afterwards if it's successful. Thank you for your time. Thank y'all.